He said it like a confession, his voice soft and eyes careful, as if he were doing me a favor. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply smiled. When I answered him, the table went quiet for a reason none of them could see yet. 3 weeks later, he would be calling everyone I knew, learning the hard way that casual still has consequences. My smile was not forgiveness. It was the sound of a door clicking shut. My name is Lexi Rivera. I am 33 years old, and if there is one thing you need to understand about me before the rest of this unravels, it is that I do not believe in luck. I believe in architecture. I believe in foundations. I am the kind of woman who budgets for car repairs 6 months before the engine light turns on. I am the homeowner in Charlotte, North Carolina, who knows exactly which year the HVAC system was installed and exactly how much equity sits in the walls of my 3-bedroom Craftsman in South End. I built my life brick by brick, mortar by mortar, ensuring that every beam was load-bearing and every investment was sound. I thought Grant Hale was part of that foundation. I thought he was the structure, not just the decoration. It was supposed to be our wedding planning dinner. That was what the calendar invite said. It was a Thursday night in late October, the kind of evening where the humidity in Charlotte finally breaks and leaves the air crisp and smelling of dried leaves and expensive cologne. We were seated at a round table in the back of a restaurant that specialized in dim lighting and portions small enough to make you feel sophisticated but hungry. The linen tablecloth was white enough to blind you, and sitting right in the center were the custom menus. They were printed on heavy cream cardstock, a tasting menu for the wedding of Lexi and Grant. I stared at the font. It was a sweeping, romantic script. It looked permanent. It looked like a promise. Inside my purse, resting against my ankle, my phone buzzed with a rhythmic, insistent vibration. I knew exactly what it was. It was a notification from my calendar reminding me that the second deposit for the venue was due in 48 hours. $5,000, non-refundable. I reached for my water glass, watching the condensation slide down the crystal, and looked at the man sitting across from me. Grant was swirling his Cabernet. He had been swirling it for 10 minutes, creating a miniature red whirlpool that never quite spilled over the edge. He was wearing the navy blazer I had bought him for his birthday, the one that made his shoulders look broader than they actually were. To his left sat Derek. To his right sat Owen. They were his groomsmen, his sounding board, his chorus. They were supposed to be here to help us taste wines and pick appetizers. Instead, they were staring at the breadbasket with the intensity of men who were trying to make themselves invisible. The silence at the table was heavy, physical. It pressed against my eardrums. Grant finally stopped swirling the wine. He set the glass down. The stem made a sharp click against the table. He did not look at me. He looked at the centerpiece, a sprawling arrangement of white hydrangeas that were already starting to wilt at the edges. "Lexi," he said. His voice was a whisper. It was soft, careful, cultivated. It was the voice of a man who had rehearsed this in the shower, in the car, perhaps even in the mirror while I was at work. I waited. "I do not think we should put a deposit down this week," he said. My hand froze halfway to the bread plate. I placed my hand back in my lap, interlacing my fingers to keep them from trembling. "Why not?" "Grant," I asked. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used in boardrooms. He exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that was meant to convey deep emotional turmoil. He looked up then, his eyes wide and pleading, the eyes of a golden retriever that had just chewed up your favorite shoes but expected a treat anyway. "I am sorry," he whispered, "but I'm not ready for a serious relationship." The world did not stop. The waiter in the corner continued to polish silverware. A couple 2 tables away laughed at a joke I could not hear. But at our table, the air left the room. I looked at him. I really looked at him. We had been together for 5 years. We had been engaged for 6 months. The wedding was in 3 months. Our names were printed on the menu sitting 2 inches from his hand. We shared a Netflix account, a dog, and a lease on a storage unit, and he was sitting there, wearing the jacket I bought him, telling me he was not ready for a serious relationship. It was such an absurd arrangement of words that I almost laughed. It was like an astronaut sitting in the cockpit of a shuttle, 10 seconds before launch, and announcing he was not really interested in space travel. Before I could speak, the chorus chimed in. Derek cleared his throat. A wet, nervous sound. "Look, Lexi," he said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the pristine tablecloth. "It is totally normal. Guys get cold feet. It is a biological thing." Owen nodded vigorously, like a bobblehead doll on a dashboard. "Yeah, exactly. It is not that he does not love you, obviously. It is just the pressure, the labels. It is a lot. He just needs a pause, a breather, just to get his head right." I looked from Derek to Owen, then back to Grant. Grant looked relieved. He looked like a man whose lawyers had just walked into the interrogation room. He nodded along with them, seizing the lifeline they threw him. "Right," Grant said, his voice gaining a fraction more confidence. "It is just the title, the permanence. I feel like we are rushing into a structure that I do not fit into yet. I need to find myself. Lexi, I need to know who I am outside of us." I sat there, and I let the math wash over me. 5 years. And then I thought about the other number. The number that had been in the headlines of the local business journals just 4 days ago. The acquisition. Marblegate Systems, my company. The software tool I had built on nights and weekends. The code I had written while Grant was playing video games. The infrastructure I had designed while he was finding himself at 3 different entry-level jobs in 2 years. We had just been acquired. The press release had gone out on Monday. My payout was not public knowledge, but the valuation of the company was. Anyone with a calculator and a basic understanding of equity could figure out that my net worth had just shifted from comfortable to life-changing. The timing was impeccable. For 5 years, while I was grinding, while I was paying the majority of the mortgage, while I was funding the vacations and the dinners, Grant had been perfectly fine with a serious relationship. He had been perfectly fine with the commitment when the commitment meant I was subsidizing his lifestyle. But now that the money was real, now that I was not just his girlfriend, but a woman with power, a woman with significant assets, suddenly, he was scared, or perhaps he was not scared. Perhaps he was strategic. I watched him. I watched the way he avoided my eyes. I watched the way he avoided the word accountable. He did not say he wanted to break up. He did not say he wanted to move out. He said he was not ready for a serious relationship. He wanted the access without the obligation. He wanted to stay in the house. He wanted to drive the car. He wanted to be the partner of the successful tech founder. But he did not want to stand at an altar and legally bind himself to me in a way that required fidelity, effort, or adult responsibility. He wanted to downgrade his subscription plan from husband to casual user, but he still wanted premium features. I looked at the menu again. Lexi and Grant. I felt a sensation in my chest, but it was not the shattering of a heart. It was the clicking of a lock. It was the sound of a safe door swinging shut and the tumblers engaging. I realized something in that silence. I realized that for the last 5 years, I had been building a cathedral, and he had just been looking for a place to sleep out of the rain. I looked at Derek and Owen, who were watching me with cautious optimism, waiting for me to cry, or scream, or beg. They were waiting for the scene. They were waiting for me to be the emotional, hysterical woman so they could comfort Grant and tell him he made the right choice avoiding the crazy one. I took a sip of my water. It was perfectly cold. I looked Grant directly in the eyes. I forced him to meet my gaze. I saw the panic flare in his pupils for a second. The fear that I was about to call him out, to list the years, the money, the sacrifices. Instead, I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a bank teller handing you a receipt for a withdrawal you did not realize would overdraw your account. It was polite, controlled, and absolutely empty. "Of course," I said. The words hung in the air, light and easy. Grant blinked. I widened my smile just a fraction. "I understand completely." "Grant," I said, "you are right. 5 years is a long time, but titles can be suffocating. If you are not ready, you are not ready. We should not force a square peg into a round hole. Grant's shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension drained out of his body so fast it was almost visible. He let out a laugh, a breathy, incredulous sound. Youths. You mean it? Absolutely, I said. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. I think you are right. We have been so focused on the wedding that we forgot to just be people. Derek slapped the table. See, told you. Man, she is cool. She gets it. Owen grinned, reaching for his wine glass. That is awesome. Lexi. Seriously, most girls would flip out. Grant was beaming now. He looked at me with something that resembled adoration, but I knew it was actually just relief. He thought he had pulled off the heist of the century. He thought he had successfully negotiated his way out of the work while keeping the job. So, Grant said, leaning back, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in months. So, we are good as... Take a step back, I nodded. Better than good. Let us keep it casual. Starting tonight. The waiter arrived at that exact moment to take our order. Grant looked at the custom menu, then up at the waiter with a grin. I will have the ribeye, he said, medium rare. And let us get a bottle of the Silver Label Cabernet. We are celebrating. Celebrating clarity, Derek added, raising an imaginary glass. I ordered the sea bass. I kept my hands folded on the table. I listened to them talk about football, about a new bar opening downtown, about a bachelor party for a friend I barely knew. They included me in the conversation, but in a different way now. I was one of the guys. I was the cool girl who did not demand things. When the bill came, the waiter placed the black leather folder in the center of the table. Usually, Grant would make a show of reaching for his wallet, waiting for me to insist. Tonight, he did not even flinch. He was casual now. Casual boyfriends do not pay for $400 dinners with their friends. I reached out and took the folder. I opened it. $385. I pulled out my card, the heavy metal one, the one that Grant loved to hear slap against the table, and slipped it inside. You are the best. Lexi, Grant said, his eyes soft and hazy from the wine. Seriously, thank you for understanding. I smiled again. Do not worry about it. I signed the receipt. I added a 25% tip. I wrote the total in neat block numbers. I wanted the waiter to remember me. I wanted everyone to remember that I was composed, generous, and calm. As we stood up to leave, Grant tried to wrap his arm around my waist. It was a reflex, a muscle memory of ownership. I gently sidestepped him, pretending to adjust my purse strap. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool Charlotte night. The valet was already pulling my car around. Grant's car was parked down the street because he did not want to pay the $20 valet fee. I will see you at home, Grant asked, standing on the curb with Derek and Owen flanking him. I looked at him through the open window of my car. The engine was purring. The heated seat was already warming my back. Sure, I said. I drove away. I watched them in my rearview mirror. 3 dark figures under the street lamp, laughing, high-fiving. They looked like boys who had just gotten away with breaking a window. I turned the corner and the smile dropped from my face instantly. It did not fade. It vanished. My heart was beating slow and steady. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me, like snow falling on a frozen lake. I thought about the deposit due in 48 hours. I thought about the joint checking account. I thought about the supplementary credit card in Grant's wallet. I thought about the Netflix password. I thought about the spare key he gave to his mother without asking me. I drove through the city I loved, the city where I had built a life out of grit and spreadsheets. And I realized that Grant was right about one thing. He was not ready. He was not ready for what happened when you told a woman who builds things that you were no longer part of the blueprint. He wanted casual. I gripped the steering wheel. I would give him casual. I would give him the most casual experience of his life. I turned the radio off so I could think. The heartbreak was there. Certainly. It was a dull ache in the center of my chest, a bruising of the ego and the soul. But as I merged onto the highway, heading toward the house that was in my name. The heartbreak began to recede, pushed back by something much more useful: inventory. I began to make a list in my head. 1. The engagement ring. It was in the safe. He had put it on a credit card, but I had paid the card off 2 months ago to help his credit score. 2. The lease on his car. I was the co-signer. 3. The cell phone plan, family bundle, my name on the bill. 4. The health insurance. He was listed as a domestic partner on my policy because he was technically a contractor at his job and the premiums were too high. The list went on. 5, 6, 7 items. By the time I took the exit for my neighborhood, I had reached 14 points of leverage. Grant thought he had set a boundary tonight. He thought he had drawn a line in the sand that said, "This far and no further." He did not realize that when you draw a line in the sand, you are also defining exactly which side of the line you are standing on. And he was standing on the side with no assets, no legal protections, and a fiancé who had just decided to treat the relationship exactly like a failing business division. I pulled into the driveway. The motion sensor lights flickered on, illuminating the brick facade of my home. It looked sturdy. It looked permanent. I parked the car and turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment in the dark, listening to the silence. Starting tonight, I whispered to the empty car. I opened the door and stepped out. I had work to do. The red numbers on the digital clock beside the bed read 3:12 in the morning. The room was perfectly silent except for the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the man sleeping next to me. Grant slept on his back, his arms thrown out wide, taking up 60% of the mattress. It was the sleep of the innocent, or more accurately, it was the sleep of the confident. He was certain that the difficult conversation was over. He believed he had navigated the rapids and was now drifting in calm water. He thought I was lying there staring at the ceiling, paralyzed by heartbreak, wondering what I could do to win him back. He thought I was formulating a plan to be sweeter, quieter, and more accommodating, just to prove to him that I was worth the commitment he was so afraid of. He was wrong. I was not wondering how to win him back. I was wondering how much of my data plan he had used this month. I slid my legs out from under the duvet. The hardwood floor was cold against my bare feet. I did not reach for a robe. I moved through the dark hallway like a ghost in my own house, avoiding the third floorboard from the door that always creaked. I knew the anatomy of this house better than I knew the back of my hand, because I was the one who paid for the inspection that found the termite damage in the subfloor. I was the one who hired the contractors to fix it. I was the one who swept up the sawdust when they left. Grant had been playing golf that weekend. I entered my home office and closed the door until it clicked softly. I did not turn on the overhead light. I sat down at my desk, a slab of reclaimed walnut that I had sanded and stained myself, and opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh, blue-white glow over my face. My eyes felt gritty, but my mind was operating with a crystalline sharpness that usually only came after 3 cups of espresso. There were no tears. Tears are for grief, and I was not grieving. I was auditing. I opened the spreadsheet titled Household Expenses and Joint Allocations. I had built this spreadsheet 3 years ago when Grant moved in. He had called it romantic, saying it showed how serious we were. I looked at the rows and columns now, and I saw what it really was. It was a ledger of parasitism. I started scrolling back through the last 12 months. Love is a blurry, soft-focus lens, but math is high definition. When you look at a relationship through the filter of a bank statement, you see the bones of the thing. I looked at the income column, then the expense column. Grant contributed exactly enough to appear participatory. His name was attached to the visible things, the social things. He paid for the Friday night dinners at the sushi place downtown. He paid for the tickets to the concerts we went to with his friends. He paid for the streaming services Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, so that every time we logged in, we saw his name on the account, Grant's account. It looked generous. It looked like partnership. But then I looked at the rows below that, the structural rows, mortgage, property tax, homeowner's insurance, car insurance for both vehicles, electricity, water, internet, groceries, the repair bill for the washing machine when it flooded the laundry room in July. All of those payments came from the account ending in 4098, my primary checking account. I did the mental calculation. Converting the percentages into hard reality, I was paying for 85% of our existence. Grant was paying for the entertainment. I was funding the foundation of the house, and he was buying the throw pillows. He had told me, time and time again, that he was saving. He said he was putting money away for our future, for the wedding, for a down payment on a vacation home we talked about buying in the mountains. I opened a new tab and logged into the joint savings account. I stared at the balance. It was $4,000. After 5 years, $4,000. That was not a down payment. That was not a wedding fund. That was less than the cost of the custom suit he wanted to wear to the ceremony. I felt a cold burn in my stomach. It was not anger yet. It was the nausea of realization. He had not been saving for us. He had been spending his income on himself, living a life of zero overhead because I was the overhead. And then I thought about the timing. I minimized the browser window and opened a folder on my desktop labeled Marblegate Systems. This was the project that had consumed my life for the last 2 years. It was a proprietary inventory management software designed for mid-sized logistics companies. It was not sexy. It was not flashy. It was boring. Dense code that solved a very expensive problem for very rich supply chain managers. I had built it between the hours of 8 at night and 2 in the morning, while Grant watched television in the living room, complaining that I worked too much. 4 days ago, the acquisition deal had closed. A major tech conglomerate had bought the IP and the client list. The initial payout was substantial. The earnout over the next 3 years would be astronomical. I looked at the date on the final contract, PDF, October 20th. Grant had started acting strange on October 21st. He had asked questions, casual questions. So, does this mean you get a check right away? How does the tax work on that? Is it considered marital property if we get married after the deal signs? I had answered him honestly because I trusted him. I told him it was separate property unless I commingled it. I told him the payout was hitting my business account on November 1st, and 3 days later, at a linen-draped table, he suddenly realized he was not ready for a serious relationship. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. It was not cold feet. It was calculation. If he married me now, with a prenup which my lawyer would insist on, he would be capped. But if we stayed casual, if he kept living in my house, driving the car I paid for, and eating the food I bought, he could enjoy the lifestyle upgrade without the legal boundaries. Or worse, he was panicking because he realized my net worth now eclipsed his by a factor of 50, and he knew he could not control a woman who did not need him for survival. He wanted to reset the terms. He wanted to be the boyfriend of a wealthy woman, not the husband of a powerful one. I leaned forward again. I needed to see how deep the rot went. I logged into my credit card portal. This was the card I had added him to as an authorized user 2 years ago for emergencies. I scanned the last billing cycle. Usually, there were gas station charges, maybe a grocery run. But in the last 3 weeks, the activity had spiked. There was a charge for $300 at a high-end menswear boutique. There was a charge for $150 at a steakhouse on a Tuesday when I was out of town for business. And then I saw them. The charges that did not make sense. Viper Strategy Group, monthly, $99. Alpha Mindset Seminar, digital, $200. The Gentleman's Edge, trial, $49. I frowned. These were not products. These were subscriptions. I opened a search engine and typed in the names. Viper Strategy Group described itself as a premier consulting firm for men who want to maximize their social value and dominate their relationships. The Gentleman's Edge was a private forum for discussing lifestyle upgrades and asset protection for the modern bachelor. I clicked on the images. It was a lot of men in suits standing next to rented sports cars, talking about how to maintain frame and keep leverage over their partners. My stomach turned. Grant was not just reading this garbage. He was paying for it, and he was paying for it with my money. I kept scrolling. I found another charge, processed just yesterday, SV Branding and Design, $500. I did not recognize the name. I searched for it. The website belonged to a woman named Sienna Vale. The homepage featured a photo of a striking woman with perfect hair and a predatory smile. Her bio described her as a brand strategist and lifestyle architect who helped up-and-coming entrepreneurs curate their public image. Why was my ex-fiancé, paying a brand strategist $500 the day before he broke up with me? I looked at the invoice details. The service listed was initial consultation, personal rebranding. The pieces clicked together with the precision of a rifle bolt sliding into place. He was rebranding. He was preparing to launch the new Grant Hale. The Grant Hale who was single, successful, and unburdened by a serious relationship. He was using my credit card to pay a woman to help him look like the kind of man who did not need my credit card. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, dry and sharp. It was hysterical, it was pathetic, and it was dangerous. I closed the browser tabs. I did not need to see anymore. I had seen the face of the enemy, and it was wearing my birthday present blazer. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. The recipient was Marcus Thorne, my attorney. He had handled the Marblegate acquisition. He was expensive, humorless, and effective. Subject urgent. Asset separation and liability exposure. Marcus, the wedding is off. The relationship is effectively terminated. Although the other party believes we are currently in a casual phase, I need to discuss immediate steps to isolate my assets. I have reason to believe there has been unauthorized use of my credit lines and potential identity exposure regarding business services. I need to know how to evict a resident who has established tenancy without a lease. And I need to do it without triggering a common law claim or a public relations issue. I am available from 7 in the morning. This is priority 1. Lexi. I hit send. The timestamp was 3:45 in the morning. I was not done. I pulled a fresh legal pad from my desk drawer. I grabbed a pen. I wrote 2 headings at the top of the page. What he can reach, what he never will again, under the first column. I started writing. The guest room for now. The food in the pantry, the Netflix account until the billing cycle ends, the perception of stability. Under the second column, the list was longer. My primary checking account, the Marblegate buyout funds, the deed to the house, the car title. My reputation, my vulnerability, my trust. I stared at the words. My trust. I drew a line through it. I pressed the pen down so hard it tore the paper. I did not need to protect my trust anymore because it was already gone. You cannot steal something that has evaporated. I looked at the screen again. At the pending charges on the credit card, I could dispute them right now. I could freeze the card instantly with a click of a mouse. My finger hovered over the freeze card button. I hesitated. If I froze the card now, he would know at breakfast. He would get an alert. He would come into the kitchen, confused, asking if there was a fraud alert. He would try to pull me into a conversation. He would try to negotiate. He would say it was a mistake. He would say he intended to pay me back. He would say we were a team. I pulled my hand back. No, if I stopped him now. I only caught him for $500. I needed to see where he was going. I needed to let him trap himself with the very bait I was about to offer. I wouldn't shut the card down yet. I would watch it. I would let him swipe it again. I would let him make the paper trail so long and so undeniable that when he finally tried to rewrite the story, there would be nowhere left to stand. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the house settle. I heard the refrigerator compressor hum in the kitchen. I heard a car pass outside, tires whispering over damp pavement. I thought about the word negotiation. In business, you negotiate when both sides have something the other wants. You trade value for value. You compromise to reach a deal. But Grant had nothing I wanted. Not anymore. He had no equity. He had no leverage. He was a liability on my balance sheet. You don't negotiate with a liability. You remove it. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the streetlights casting long, orange shadows across the lawn. I paid a landscaping crew to keep perfect. I was going to have to be an actor. I was going to have to play the role of the chill, casual girlfriend. I was going to have to smile while he spent my money on his personal rebranding. I was going to have to watch him strut around my house like he owned it, all while I was quietly, methodically sawing through the floorboards beneath his feet. It would be the hardest thing I had ever done. I am a direct person. I like clear lines. I like efficiency. But for this to work, for me to get out of this clean, I had to be murky. I had to be slow. I turned away from the window and walked back toward the bedroom. I slipped back into the room. Grant shifted in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. He rolled over, his arm flopping across the empty space where I had been. I climbed back into bed. I lay on my back, stiff and straight, staring at the ceiling fan blade that was collecting dust. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I lay there and rehearsed my lines for the morning. I practiced the tone of my voice, light, breezy, unbothered. Good morning, Grant. Sleep well. No, don't worry about the coffee. I'll grab some on the way to the office. Have a great day. I breathed in. I breathed out. The woman who loved him had died at the restaurant table 3 hours ago. The woman lying in the bed now was the CEO of Marblegate Systems, and she was dealing with a hostile takeover attempt, and as the sun began to turn the sky gray outside the window, I knew one thing for certain. He had absolutely no idea who he was sleeping next to. The conference room at Thorne & Associates smelled of lemon polish and expensive coffee. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel like your problems were small because the table was so large. I sat at the far end, my hands resting on the cool mahogany, watching Marcus slide a thick stack of documents across the surface. Beside him sat Elias, a financial planner who looked at spreadsheets the way some men looked at centerfolds. There were no tissues on the table. There were no sympathetic tilts of the head. I had not come here to cry about a broken engagement. I had come here to secure the perimeter. We need to move the buyout funds immediately, Marcus said. His voice was dry, devoid of pity. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit, which was exactly what I was paying him to be. If the funds hit your primary account while he is still establishing residency and common law precedents, it gets messy, not impossible to clean up, but expensive. I nodded. Do it. Elias tapped his tablet. I have set up a holding company, Rivera Holdings, LLC. We will funnel the Marblegate payout directly into the corporate account. From there, we will distribute it into a series of trusts. The primary checking account, the one Grant has access to, or at least visibility of, will show a standard monthly deposit for living expenses. Nothing more. To him, it will look like business as usual. To the IRS and the courts, it will look like a fortress. I watched them work. It was a beautiful thing. Really, in the movies. The woman burns the man's clothes on the lawn. In reality, the woman restructures her asset portfolio so that the man is legally unable to touch a single cent of her net worth. We spent the next 2 hours signing papers. I signed my name until my hand cramped. With every signature, I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest. I was building a wall. It was invisible, it was silent, and it was impenetrable. When I walked out of the office, it was 2 p.m. The sun was shining on the skyscrapers of uptown Charlotte, bouncing off the glass and steel. I adjusted my sunglasses and checked my phone. 0 missed calls from Grant. He was enjoying his new freedom. He was probably at the gym, or perhaps at a strategy lunch with one of his new bachelor friends, talking about how great it felt to have space. I walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, ordered a black Americano, and sat in the corner with my back to the wall. I opened my laptop. It was time to turn off the faucet. Grant had a supplementary credit card issued under my account. It was an American Express Platinum. I had given it to him for travel expenses when we went to Europe last year, and I had never taken it back because it seemed petty. He liked the weight of it. He liked the way it looked when he put it in the billfold. I logged into the portal. I did not cut the card up. I did not call him and demand it back. I simply clicked the tab labeled Manage Authorized Users. I found his name, Grant Hale. There was a small button next to his name. Remove User. I clicked it. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to remove Grant Hale? This card will be deactivated immediately. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. His name was gone. It was anticlimactic. There was no sound, no explosion, just a line of code executing a command on a server somewhere in Virginia. But in the real world, the plastic card in his wallet had just turned into a useless piece of scrap metal. The next time he tried to buy a round of drinks for his friends to celebrate his casual lifestyle, he was going to learn a very public lesson about liquidity. I moved on to the subscriptions. I went through every shared service we had: Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, the meal kit delivery service, the dog food subscription. I changed the password for every single one of them. I did not use my usual password, the one based on the street I grew up on. Grant knew that one. I used a random generator, strings of 16 characters, a mix of letters, numbers, and symbols that no human being could guess. G7X9 LM$2 PQ V4ZER. I updated the recovery email. It used to be his address, just in case I got locked out. I changed it to a new, encrypted email account I had created that morning. Then I enabled multi-factor authentication. Now, if he wanted to watch a movie on my account, he would need a 6-digit code sent to my phone. If he wanted to order protein powder on my Amazon Prime, he would need my fingerprint. I was locking the digital doors, one by one. He wanted to be casual. Casual meant you did not get to use my Prime shipping. Casual meant you watched commercials on the free version of Spotify. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, and it was perfect. I decided to check my credit report while I was logged in. I wanted to make sure the removal of the authorized user card had gone through pending status. I opened the credit monitoring dashboard. The score was fine, 780, but there was a red flag notification in the corner. New inquiry detected. I frowned. I had not applied for anything. I clicked on the notification. Inquiry date, October 24th. That was yesterday. The day of the breakup lunch. Creditor Auto 1 Leasing. Status pending. I stared at the screen. My blood went cold, not with sadness, but with the icy clarity of a detective finding the murder weapon. Grant was trying to lease a car. He drove a 3-year-old sedan that was perfectly fine. A car that I had co-signed for, but apparently, the new Grant needed a new ride to go with his new brand. I clicked for more details. The application had been submitted using my home address. That was standard. He lived there. But under household income, the number listed was not his salary. It was our combined income. He was using my income, my stability, my credit worthiness to qualify for a luxury lease he could not afford on his own. He was leveraging a relationship he had just ended to finance the props for his single life. This was not just freeloading. This was fraud. It was soft fraud. The kind that happens between partners all the time. The kind that people shrug off as a misunderstanding. But we were not partners. We were casual. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder labeled Evidence. I downloaded the full report as a PDF. I did not call him. I did not text him a furious paragraph asking him what the hell he was doing. Confrontation is a gift. Confrontation tells the enemy that you are on to them. It gives them a chance to come up with a lie. If I asked him about it, he would say it was an accident. He would say the dealer just ran the numbers based on the old info. He would gaslight me until I felt guilty for suspecting him, so I stayed silent. I let the inquiry sit there. I let the record show that 24 hours after telling me he could not commit to me, he had tried to commit my credit score to a 48-month lease on a German sports car. I closed the laptop and walked out of the coffee shop. I got in my car and drove to the storage facility on the edge of town. It was a nondescript concrete building with orange doors. I had rented a 5x5 unit that morning, paying in cash for 6 months up front. I opened the trunk. Inside was a single plastic bin. It did not contain clothes. It did not contain furniture. If Grant saw me moving furniture, he would know I was leaving. The bin contained the things that could not be replaced: my birth certificate, my passport, the deed to the house, the hard drive with the backup of my laptop, my grandmother's vintage watch, the diamond earrings my father gave me for graduation. These were the hostages. When a relationship collapses, these are the things that go missing. These are the things that get accidentally thrown out or held for ransom. I carried the bin into the unit. The air inside was cool and smelled of dust and cardboard. I placed the bin on the concrete floor. I locked the roll-up door. I put the key on my key ring, right next to the house key. Grant would never know this place existed. I got back in the car. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I had one more call to make. I dialed the number for Eloise, our wedding planner. She was the best in Charlotte, a woman who could secure a ballroom with a text message. She answered on the first ring. "Lexi, darling. I was just about to email you about the floral mock-ups." "Hi, Eloise," I said. My voice was level, professional. "I need to pause the vendor contracts." There was a silence on the line. "A pause?" Eloise asked. Her tone shifted from bubbly to cautious. "Yes," I said. "We are dealing with some financial restructuring due to the business acquisition. My liquidity is tied up in escrow for a few weeks, and I want to be prudent. I do not want to cancel anything, but I need to freeze all deposits and decision-making for 30 days. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. Rich people had liquidity problems all the time. It was less embarrassing than saying my fiancé is having an identity crisis. "I see," Eloise said, though I could tell she suspected the truth. Wedding planners have a sixth sense for doomed engagements. "Okay, Lexi, I can hold the venue and the caterer for 30 days, but the band might release the date if we do not send the check by Friday. Let them release it." I said, "Are you sure I am sure? Just hold what you can. I will be in touch." I hung up. I had just effectively paused my own wedding. The train had been hurtling down the tracks at 100 miles an hour, and I had just pulled the emergency brake. But I did not tell Grant. If I told him I had paused the wedding, he would have to confront the reality of what he had done. He would have to deal with the fallout. He would have to tell his mother. He would have to tell Derek and Owen that there was no bachelor party. I wanted him to live in the delusion a little longer. I wanted him to think he still had the safety net. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway at 5:15. Grant's car was there. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked tired, but they did not look red. My mouth was set in a firm line. I relaxed my jaw. I forced the corners of my mouth up. I practiced the expression. It was the expression of a woman who was fine. A woman who was cool. A woman who accepted that relationships were fluid and labels were outdated. It was a mask. Yesterday, that mask would have felt heavy. It would have felt like a betrayal of my own heart. But today, after the lawyer, after the bank transfers, after the credit report, the mask felt light. It felt like armor. I realized then that the hardest part of a breakup is not the leaving. It is the indecision. It is the hope. It is the agonizing question of what if. I had no what ifs left. I had screenshots. I got out of the car, grabbed my purse, and walked up the front steps. I unlocked the front door. Grant was in the living room, watching sports on the 80-inch television I had bought for the Super Bowl. He had a beer in his hand. He looked up as I walked in, a tentative, boyish smile on his face. "Hey," he said, "you are home late. Work was crazy." I said breezily. I tossed my keys in the bowl. I walked past him toward the kitchen. I did not kiss him. I did not touch his shoulder. He did not seem to notice. He just turned back to the TV, content in his castle, blissfully unaware that the moat had been drained and the drawbridge had been raised. "How was your day?" I called out from the kitchen as I poured myself a glass of water. "Good," he yelled back. "Really good. I think this new headspace is really working for me. Lexi, I feel lighter." I took a sip of water. "Me too." "Grant," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Me too." Saturday morning arrived with the aggressive brightness of a day that did not know my life had imploded. Sunlight streamed through the plantation shutters I had installed 2 years ago, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. In the kitchen, the smell of roasted coffee beans and burnt toast was overwhelming. Grant was humming. He was standing by the kitchen island, wearing sweatpants and a tight t-shirt, whisking eggs in a ceramic bowl. He looked vibrant. He looked lighter. He looked like a man who had just dropped a heavy backpack after a long hike and was stretching his shoulders, marveling at the range of motion. "Good morning," he said. He did not look at me with guilt. He looked at me with a terrifying, benevolent pity. "Coffee is fresh. I used the French press." I stood in the doorway, clutching my robe. "Thank you," I said. My voice was soft. I kept my face neutral. I was operating on a delay, like a video call with a bad connection. This was calculated. If I screamed, we would have a fight. If we had a fight, he would feel important. He would feel like the protagonist of a drama. But if I was boring, if I was quiet, then he was just a man making eggs in a house he did not own. Grant poured a cup of coffee and slid it toward me. He leaned against the counter, crossing his ankles. "I have been thinking," he said, gesturing with the whisk, "about what we talked about at dinner, about the space." I took a sip of the coffee. It was good. He made good coffee. It was one of the few utilities he provided. "Go on," I said. "I really think this is healthy." "Lexi," he said. His eyes were wide and earnest. "It is think of it like a gym membership. You know, sometimes you go every day and you burn out. You pull a muscle. Sometimes you just need to freeze the membership for a month. You do not quit the gym. You just stop going until you actually want to work out again. That is what this is. We are just freezing the membership." I stared at him over the rim of my mug. He was comparing our 5-year relationship, our engagement, the life we had built, to a $40 a month access pass to a weight room. He did not see the insult. He saw wisdom. He thought he was being profound. "That makes sense, Grant," I said. He beamed. "Right, I knew you would get it. You are logical. That is what I love about you. No drama, just logic." He went back to whisking the eggs, whistling a tune I did not recognize. I watched the muscles in his back move. He was so confident that I was still here. He thought I was a fixture, like the Sub-Zero refrigerator or the marble countertops. He thought he could walk away, explore the world, and when he came back, I would still be standing here, keeping the milk cold and the surfaces clean. I finished my coffee and placed the mug in the sink. "I have some work to catch up on," I said. "On a Saturday," he asked, frowning slightly. "Just a few things," I said. I retreated to my office. I did not close the door all the way. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to monitor his movements. I sat at my desk and pulled up the United States Postal Service website. The house was currently the central nervous system of our shared life. Every bill, every invitation, every piece of junk mail came here. If I was going to sever the limb, I had to stop the blood flow. I filled out the digital change of an address form. I was not moving out. I was staying right here. But I was moving my administrative existence to a secure post office box in Uptown, 3 miles away. I redirected my bank statements. I redirected my insurance documents. I redirected the shareholder updates from the Marblegate acquisition. If Grant happened to check the mail tomorrow, he would find nothing but coupons for pizza and perhaps a catalog addressed to him. The correspondence of Lexi Rivera, the owner of the house, was going dark. I did this quietly. I did not type furiously. I clicked the mouse gently. Next, I logged into the utility accounts: Duke Energy, Piedmont Natural Gas, Charlotte Water. The bills were all in my name, but the contact email was a shared inbox we had created years ago for household management. It was an artifact of a time when I thought transparency was romantic. I changed the contact email to my new, encrypted address. I changed the passwords. I did not turn off the power. I did not turn off the water. That would be petty, and pettiness is loud. I wanted silence. I wanted him to flip a switch and have the lights come on, never realizing that he no longer had the ability to see the bill, view the usage, or call customer service if something went wrong. He was becoming a guest in his own life, and he did not even know it. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. I frowned. It was from the lighting vendor for the wedding reception. Lumina Events. Subject updated quote per Grant's request. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I opened the email. "Hi, Lexi. Great chatting with Grant this morning. as discussed. We have shifted the budget from the floral pin spots to the intelligent dance floor lighting package, since the guest count might be fluctuating. Grant mentioned we could reallocate the deposit funds to upgrade the DJ booth visuals. Attached is the revised invoice. Let us know if you approve. I read the paragraph twice. Grant had called the lighting vendor. He had called them this morning, probably while the coffee was brewing, probably 5 minutes before he gave me his speech about gym memberships. He was not canceling the wedding. He was reformatting it. He was calling vendors and adjusting the budget. He was taking the money I had committed my money and trying to move it from things I cared about, like flowers, to things he cared about, like a nightclub-style light show for the dance floor. He thought the wedding was still happening, or rather, he thought a party was still happening. He thought that because we were casual, we could just throw a big, expensive bash without the legal vows, and I would foot the bill because I was the cool girl who understood his need for space. He was treating my bank account like a corporate expense card that he still had authorization to use. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy. I wanted to march into the kitchen, shove the phone in his face, and scream at him. I wanted to ask him how he dared to reallocate my deposit money while he was actively breaking my heart, but I stopped. I looked at the door. I could hear the television in the living room. He was watching college football pre-game coverage. If I confronted him, he would gaslight me. He would say, "I was just trying to make the party better for everyone." "Lexi, why are you so controlling? I thought we were cool." Confrontation invites negotiation. I did not want to negotiate. I hit reply on the email. "Hi team, thank you for the update. Please hold on any changes. Do not execute any new orders or reallocations until you hear directly from me. Grant is not authorized to approve financial changes to this contract. I will follow up on Monday. Best, Lexi." I sent it. I did not tell Grant. I let him believe he had successfully upgraded the DJ booth. I let him believe he was still steering the ship. He was spinning a plastic wheel on a dashboard while I drove the car from the passenger seat. I closed the laptop and stood up. I needed to leave the house. The air in here was becoming too thin. I walked into the living room. Grant was sprawled on the sectional sofa, a bag of chips open on his chest. "I'm going to run some errands," I said. He did not look away from the screen. "Cool. Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight? Or are we doing the fend for yourself thing?" I paused. "Usually. I cooked on Saturdays. Or I made a reservation at a nice place and paid for it. I'm not sure yet." I said, "I will let you know." "Take your time," he said, popping a chip into his mouth. "No pressure." I walked out the door. I drove 20 minutes to a nondescript office park in South Park. I had an appointment that I had booked yesterday afternoon, paying a rush fee to get a Saturday slot. The sign on the door said, "Higgins and Associates Real Estate Law." Mrs. Higgins was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible way a human being could lie about property lines. She did not offer me coffee. She offered me a legal pad. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair, "you own the property?" "Sole deed." "Yes," I said. "I bought it 3 years before he moved in." "Is there a lease?" "No." "Does he pay rent?" "No." "He pays for groceries sometimes. He pays for utilities occasionally. But it is sporadic." Mrs. Higgins made a note. "In North Carolina," she said, her voice raspy, "he is essentially a tenant at will. Even without a lease, if he has established residency, which he has, you cannot just change the locks and throw his clothes on the lawn. That is an illegal eviction. He could sue you for damages, and he would win." I nodded. I knew this. That was why I was here. "So what are my options?" I asked. "You have 2 clean paths," she said. "Path 1. You serve him with a 30-day notice to vacate. It is formal. It is legal. If he does not leave in 30 days, we file for summary ejectment. The sheriff removes him. It is public. It is slow. And it is ugly." I shook my head. "I do not want ugly. Not yet." "Path 2. She continued. "You sell the house." I blinked. "Sell it if you sell the property. The tenancy is terminated upon the transfer of possession. Unless there is a lease that survives the sale, which there isn't, you list it, you sell it, you move. He has to leave because the owner is no longer you. I looked down at my hands. I loved that house. I had picked out the backsplash. I had planted the Japanese maple in the front yard. I had sanded the floors. But it was tainted now. Every room had a memory of him. The kitchen where he made his eggs. The living room where he sprawled on the sofa. The bedroom where he slept like a baby while I stared at the ceiling. If I sell, I said, I control the timeline. Exactly, Mrs. Higgins said, and you control the narrative. You are not kicking him out. You are downsizing. You are taking advantage of the market. You are liquidating assets for business reasons. It is not personal. It is just business. I sat with that thought. Grant assumed he had a place to live. He assumed that even if we were casual, he still had a roof over his head. He did not realize that the roof was a liquid asset. I will think about it, I said, but I want the paperwork for the notice to vacate drafted. Just in case. Mrs. Higgins smiled. A shark smiling at another shark. Smart girl. I drove home in the twilight. The city was waking up for Saturday night. People were going out to dinner, to movies, to bars. Couples were holding hands on the sidewalk. I felt a profound sense of isolation, but it was not lonely. It was the isolation of a general in a bunker. When I got back to the house, the living room was empty, the TV was off. There was a note on the counter, scrawled on the back of a piece of junk mail. Gone out with Derek and Owen. Drinks at the Crunkleton. Don't wait up. G. I stared at the note. The Crunkleton was expensive. It was a place where you went to be seen. It was a place where you ordered $20 cocktails and looked for women. He was going out. On the first Saturday after telling me he wasn't ready for a relationship, he was going out with his boys to celebrate. He was strutting. I could imagine him there, leaning against the bar, wearing that blazer, telling Derek and Owen how great it was to have his freedom back, how cool I was about everything. He was probably scanning the room, auditioning replacements. He was looking for a girl who was less serious, less structured. He was auditioning for a role that was no longer available. I crumpled his note and threw it in the recycling bin. I walked through the silent house. It felt different now. It felt temporary. I looked at the walls, and I did not see my home. I saw equity. I saw a listing price. I went to the kitchen island. I found a fresh notepad. I took a black Sharpie from the drawer. I needed to communicate with him, but I did not want to text him. Texting was too intimate. Texting was for people who were connected. I wrote 2 words. The letters were thick and black against the white paper. Casual accepted. I placed the note right next to the coffee maker. He would see it when he came home tonight, stumbling in, drunk on expensive bourbon and his own ego, or he would see it tomorrow morning when he reached for the caffeine to cure his hangover. It looked like a concession. It looked like I was agreeing to his terms. Casual accepted, but to me, it meant something else. It meant that the contract was signed. It meant that I was no longer his fiancé, no longer his partner, no longer his safety net. I was a casual observer of his downfall. I turned off the lights in the kitchen. I walked up the stairs to the bedroom. I stripped off my clothes and put on my silk pajamas. I climbed into the center of the bed. Usually, I slept on the left side, curling myself into a small shape to give him room. Tonight, I sprawled. I stretched my arms out. I took up the entire mattress. I listened to the silence of the house. I did not wait for the sound of his car. I did not check my phone. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 months, my mind was quiet. The anxiety was gone. The confusion was gone. I knew exactly what I was doing. I fell asleep within minutes, and I slept better than I had in years. Sunday is usually a day of rest, but for Grant, it was apparently the day of reinvestment. Specifically, reinvestment in the brand of Grant Hale. While I was at home, methodically vacuuming the living room and listening to a podcast about asset forfeiture laws, Grant was at a boutique in South Park called the Gentleman's Quarters. It is the kind of store where they offer you a glass of bourbon when you walk in and where the socks cost more than a tank of gas. It is a store designed to make men feel like captains of industry. even if they are actually mid-level project coordinators who are technically between contracts. I know this because I received the alert on my phone at 1:15 in the afternoon. Or rather, I received the attempted alert. Grant was standing at the counter. He had selected a new wardrobe for his new life, a unstructured Italian blazer, 2 pairs of raw denim jeans, a pair of leather loafers that were meant to be worn without socks. It was the uniform of the carelessly wealthy bachelor, the kind of man who has casual relationships because he is too busy jet-setting to settle down. He placed the items on the counter. The sales associate, a young man with a perfectly trimmed beard, probably complimented him on his taste. Grant probably smiled that easy, boyish smile, the one that used to make my stomach flip but now just made me think of a used car salesman covering up a rusted chassis. Grant reached into his wallet and pulled out the platinum card. My card, the heavy metal one that made a satisfying clack when it hit the glass countertop. He inserted the chip. He waited. He was likely already thinking about where he would wear that blazer tonight. Maybe he would meet Derek and Owen for brunch. Maybe he would run into Sienna Vale. Then, the machine made a noise. It is a specific noise. It is not a beep. It is a low, guttural buzz. A sound of rejection. Transaction declined. Grant would have frowned. He would have laughed it off. A small, confident chuckle. Chips are so sensitive these days. He likely said, "Let me try it again." He pulled the card out. He wiped the chip on his sleeve, the sleeve of the shirt I bought him for Christmas. He inserted it again. Buzz. Transaction declined. The sales associate would have stopped smiling by now. He would have looked at the line of customers forming behind Grant. He would have lowered his voice to that polite, pitying whisper that service workers reserve for people who are about to be humiliated. "Do you have another form of payment?" Sir Grant did not have another form of payment. Not for an $800 purchase. His personal debit card had a balance that hovered in the low 3 figures. I can imagine the heat creeping up his neck. I can imagine the sweat breaking out on his hairline. Confidence is a luxury product, and Grant had just realized he could no longer afford it. He stepped out of line, leaving the clothes on the counter. He pulled out his phone. He dialed the customer service number on the back of the card, his fingers trembling with righteous indignation. He was ready to yell at a representative about fraud blocks and travel alerts. He got a representative named Sarah. I know this because the call log on the account notes captures the name of the agent. "There is a hold on my card," Grant would have said, his voice tight. "I'm trying to make a purchase and it is declining." I imagine Sarah typing for a moment, the silence stretching out like a rubber band. "I am sorry, sir," she would have said, her voice calm and professional, "but this card has been deactivated." Deactivated. Why was there a breach? "Number, sir. The primary account holder removed you as an authorized user yesterday afternoon." Grant stood on the sidewalk outside the boutique, holding a piece of useless plastic in his hand. The primary account holder, me. He did not call me immediately. He waited 10 minutes. He needed to compose himself. He needed to remember the script. We were casual. He could not scream at me like a husband. He had to play it cool. My phone rang at 1:30. I looked at the screen. Grant. I let it ring twice before I answered. I put on my headset and kept vacuuming. Though I turned the machine off, "Hey," I said. My voice was light, breathless. I sounded like I was in the middle of a fantastic yoga session. "What is up?" "Hey." "Lexi," he said. He sounded tense, but he was forcing a laugh. "So, weird thing. I am at the store, trying to pick up a few things for work. And the Amex declined. I called them, and they said something crazy about me being removed." "Oh," I said. I sounded surprised, but not apologetic. "Yes, I did that yesterday." Silence. You did?" "Well, yes," I said. I grabbed a dust cloth and started wiping down the baseboards. Since we are shifting to a casual dynamic, I figured we needed to separate our finances. Casual partners do not typically share credit lines. "Right. I just wanted to respect the new boundaries you set," he sputtered. It was a wet, choking sound. "Right," he said. "I mean, yeah, obviously, but I did not think you would do it immediately, without telling me. I am standing at the register. Lexi. It was kind of embarrassing. I paused. I let the silence hang there. I am sorry it was awkward. Grant, I said, my voice dripping with reasonable kindness. But I assumed you would want your own financial independence. You talked so much about needing to find yourself. I did not want my money to overshadow your journey. He could not argue with that. If he argued, he would have to admit that he did not want independence. He wanted sponsorship. Yeah, no, I get it, he said, his voice tight. It is just, usually people give a heads up. I will keep that in mind for next time, I said cheerfully. Was there anything else? I am kind of in the middle of a deep clean. No, he said. No, that is it. I will see you later. He hung up. He did not come home immediately. He went to find Derek and Owen. He needed an audience who would agree with him. He needed an echo chamber. I can picture them sitting at a sports bar, nursing cheap beers because Grant could no longer put a round of craft cocktails on my tab. Grant would be complaining, showing them the deactivated card like it was a war wound. She is crazy, he would say. She is totally overreacting. I asked for a little space, and she cuts off my card. That is spiteful. Derek, who had never paid for a dinner in his life, would nod sagely. She is just hurt. Man, she is trying to get a reaction out of you. She is cooling off. Give it a week. She will come crawling back with a new card and an apology. Yeah, Owen would add. Women hate losing control. She is just lashing out. Just ignore it. Don't let her see you sweat. They built him back up. They pumped him full of false confidence. They told him that I was acting out of emotion, not calculation. They told him that I was a hysterical woman scorned, not a CEO mitigating risk. Grant came home at 5 o'clock. I was in the kitchen, prepping a salad. I was chopping cucumbers with rhythmic precision. He walked in, and I could feel the performance radiating off him. He was doing the wounded prince act. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were mournful. And he sighed loud enough to be heard from the driveway. He tossed his keys on the counter. He did not have any shopping bags. Hey, he said. Hey, I said, not looking up from the cucumbers. He leaned against the fridge, crossing his arms. Look, Lexi, I do not want to fight. I stopped chopping. I am not fighting. Grant, I am making dinner. He exhaled sharply. You know what I mean. The card thing. It felt aggressive. I turned to face him. I held the knife loosely in my hand, resting it against the cutting board. Aggressive, I asked. Grant, you broke off our engagement 48 hours ago. You said you weren't ready for a serious relationship. Sharing a credit limit of $50,000 is extremely serious. I was just aligning our financial reality with the relationship status you chose. How is that aggressive? He ran a hand through his hair. He looked frustrated that I was using logic. He wanted tears. He wanted me to scream, how could you leave me, so he could say, I just need time. It is not the logic. Lexi, he said, it is the vibe. It feels like you are punishing me. I thought we were going to be friends. I thought you understood. I looked at him, and for a second, the mask almost slipped. I thought you understood. In Grant's language, understanding meant obedience. He thought that if I understood his need for space, I would sit quietly in the corner, keeping his seat warm, paying his bills, and waiting for him to decide he was ready to be an adult. He thought understanding meant accepting his terms without setting any of my own. I smiled. It was a terrifyingly calm smile. I do understand. Grant, I said, I understand perfectly. And because I value our friendship, I want to make sure we do not have money complicating things. Money ruins casual relationships. This keeps it clean. He stared at me. He was looking for a crack. He was looking for the anger, but he found only smooth, impenetrable surface. Okay, he said finally. Okay, if that is how you want to play it, I am not playing. Grant, I said, I am just budgeting. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, my beer, and stormed out to the living room. He sat on the couch and pulled out his phone. I went back to chopping. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was going to check my social media. He wanted to see if I had posted anything sad. He wanted to see if I had changed my relationship status. He wanted to see if I was posting cryptic quotes about betrayal. He opened Instagram. He typed in my handle. He would have seen a gray circle where my profile picture used to be. User not found. He would have frowned. He would have checked his connection. He switched to Facebook. Content not available. He switched to LinkedIn. Profile not found. I heard him shift on the couch. I heard the frantic tapping of his thumb against the screen. I had not blocked him. Blocking him would signal that I cared. Blocking him would be a reaction. I had deactivated everything. I had taken my entire digital existence offline, to him, and to the world he was trying to impress. Lexi Rivera had simply ceased to exist. This terrified him more than the credit card. Grant lived for the audience. He lived for the likes, the comments, the digital validation. If I was gone, he could not spy on me. He could not see who I was with. He could not see if I was sad. He could not see if I was moving on. He was staring into a void. He came back into the kitchen 5 minutes later. He looked genuinely rattled. "Did you delete your Instagram?" he asked. I nodded. Yes. Why? I shrugged. Social media is for sharing your life with people. Since my life is changing, I decided to take a break. Focus on the real world. You know, like you said, clarity. He stared at me. He did not know what to do with a woman who refused to perform her grief for an audience. He retreated to the guest room he had started sleeping there last night, claiming he needed better sleep hygiene, and started making phone calls. I could not hear the words, but I knew the tone. It was the hushed, urgent tone of a man trying to control a story that was spinning out of his hands. He was calling our mutual friends. He was calling his mother. He was calling anyone who would listen. He was telling them that I was not taking the breakup well. "She is spiraling," he was probably saying. "She cut me off financially. She deleted all her social media. She is acting really erratic. I am actually kind of worried about her stability." He was painting a picture of a woman on the verge of a breakdown. He was framing himself as the concerned, benevolent ex who was just trying to help me through my episode. I knew this because an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin Mara, who had never liked Grant. Mara, who had once told me that Grant looked like the kind of guy who would steal your identity and help you look for it. I picked up the phone. "Hey, Mara," I said. "Lexi," she said. Her voice was low. "I just got a text from Derek's girlfriend. Apparently, Grant is telling people you are having a mental health crisis. He is telling people you deleted your accounts because you are unstable, and that he is staying in the house to keep an eye on you, because he is afraid of what you might do." I felt a flash of heat, sharp and white. He was using his freeloading as a badge of honor. He was staying in my house, eating my food, and telling the world he was my jailer for my own safety. I did not scream. I did not cry. "What did you say to her?" I asked Mara. "I told her that was interesting," Mara said, "and I told her that usually people who are having mental breakdowns do not have higher credit scores than the people taking care of them." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "Listen, Lexi," Mara said. "He is trying to make you look crazy so that when you finally kick him out, he looks like the victim. He is preloading the narrative." "I know." I said. "Do you want me to post something?" Mara asked. "Do you want me to tell everyone he is a mooch and a liar?" "No," I said firmly. "Do not say a word. Let him talk. Let him tell everyone I'm crazy. Let him tell everyone I am unstable." "Why?" Mara asked. "Because," I said, looking at the folder on the counter where I kept my legal documents. "When the truth comes out, I want his version to be so far removed from reality that he looks delusional. If I defend myself now, it is a he said, she said. But if I stay silent, if I let him build a castle of lies, then all I have to do is pull one brick." I finished, and the whole thing comes down. Mara whispered, "Exactly." I hung up the phone. I walked into the living room. Grant was back on the couch, typing furiously on his phone. He looked up at me with that same pitying expression. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem a little quiet." "I am fine." "Grant," I said, "just tired." "Take it easy," he said. "Do not overthink things. I smiled. I will try not to. I went upstairs to my office. I opened my laptop. I created a new document. Log entry. October 26th. Subject defamation and character assassination. I wrote down everything Mara had told me. I wrote down the time of the call. I wrote down the names of the people he was contacting. I was not unstable. I was not emotional. I was a stenographer at my own trial, and the prosecution was making a magnificent case against himself. Monday morning broke with a gray, relentless drizzle that coated Charlotte in a sheen of wet slate. I sat in my home office, the door locked, staring at a screenshot that had just arrived on my phone. It was from Mara. She had obtained it from a friend of a friend who was dating Derek, the groomsman who had sat at the restaurant table and told me that Grant just needed space. The image was a capture of a group chat named The Inner Circle. The timestamp was dated 3 days ago, specifically 20 minutes before we met for dinner. Derek, remember, do not do it until the check clears. You need to make sure the joint account is funded before you drop the bomb. Once you go casual, she might lock it down. Grant, I know. I am handling it. I transferred $5,000 this morning, just to be safe. Owen Smart, lock her down financially before you disappear emotionally. I stared at the words. The white text on the blue background blurred slightly as my eyes tried to adjust to the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I had spent the last 3 days believing that Derek and Owen were just clueless enablers, frat boys who had never grown up, cheering on their friend who was having commitment issues. I thought they were witnesses. I was wrong. They were not witnesses. They were accomplices. They were support staff for a heist. The dinner had not been a nervous confession of a man with cold feet. It had been a scheduled operation. They had sat there, drinking the wine I paid for, eating the bread I paid for, knowing exactly what Grant was going to say and exactly why he was saying it. They were checking their watches, waiting for the extraction team. The $5,000 Grant mentioned was the transfer I had noticed on Friday, money he had moved from his personal savings into our joint account, which he then immediately spent on the credit card bill. He was not contributing. He was cycling money to make it look like he was invested, just in case he needed to argue that our finances were commingled. I put the phone down on the desk. My hands were not shaking. In fact, they were perfectly still. A cold, heavy stone settled in the pit of my stomach. This was no longer a breakup. This was a corporate espionage case. I needed to know who was running the strategy. Grant was not smart enough to come up with lock her down financially before you disappear emotionally. Grant was a man who thought a diversified portfolio meant owning 2 different colors of the same sneaker. Someone was coaching him. Someone was giving him the playbook. I thought back to the credit card charge I had seen on the first night. SV branding and design. $500. Sienna Vale. I opened a new incognito browser window. I could not use my social media accounts because they were deactivated, and reactivating them would send a notification to Grant. I had to use alternative methods. I searched for Sienna Vale Charlotte brand strategist. Her website was a glossy, beige and gold shrine to narcissism. There were photos of her holding champagne flutes, photos of her standing in front of private jets that were clearly parked and not running, and photos of her laughing with men in suits who looked uncomfortable. I navigated to her testimonials page. It was filled with quotes from men. Sienna helped me realize my worth. Sienna taught me how to stop being a provider and start being a partner. Sienna showed me that my time is an asset. I read between the lines. Sienna Vale was not a brand strategist. She was a mercenary. She taught mediocre men how to repackage their inadequacy as high value and how to extract resources from successful partners. I needed to know if Grant was just a client or something more. I called Chloe. Chloe worked in marketing at a large bank in Uptown, and she knew everyone. She was the kind of person who knew who was sleeping with whom before the sheets were even warm. Chloe, I said when she answered, I need a favor. What do you know about Sienna Vale? There was a pause, and then a low, knowing laugh. Oh, honey, Sienna. She is the shark in the goldfish pond. Why Grant is seeing her? I said, for branding. Chloe snorted. Branding. Is that what they are calling it now, Lexi? Sienna does not do branding. She does extraction. She targets guys who are dating high-net-worth women, helps them level up their image, and usually ends up dating them once they have secured the bag. I felt a click in my brain. Is she talking about him, I asked. Let me check the group chat, Chloe said. I waited. I heard the sound of typing. Okay, Chloe said, her voice dropping to a whisper. So, apparently, she was at a mixer on Thursday night. She was telling people she is working with a tech founder who just had a massive exit. She said he is going to be a whale once he untangles himself from his controlling ex. I closed my eyes. Grant. She was talking about Grant. He was presenting himself to her and to the world as the tech founder. He was taking my achievement, my sleepless nights, my code, and wearing it like a costume to impress a woman who taught seminars on how to be a parasite. He was not just leaving me. He was rewriting history to erase me. Thank you. Chloe, I said, anytime. Lexi, watch your back. She is nasty. I hung up. I sat in the silence of the office. The rain tapped against the window pane. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly how far he had taken this lie. If he was just bragging at parties, that was pathetic but legal. But if he was putting it in writing, if he was using it to gain leverage, I stood up and walked out of the office. Grant was gone. He had left early, claiming he had a strategy meeting for his career. He was likely with Sienna, spending money he did not have on a lunch he did not earn. I walked into the living room. On the coffee table sat the iPad. It was an old model, one we had bought 3 years ago. We used it mostly for controlling the Sonos system and looking up recipes. It was signed into a shared family account. I picked it up. The screen was smudged with fingerprints. I unlocked it. The passcode was still his birthday. I opened the Mail app. It was logged into his personal Gmail. He must have used it this morning and forgotten to log out. Sloppy. Casual men are always sloppy because they think they are smarter than the room. I went to the sent folder. Nothing interesting. Just a few job applications to vague consulting roles. I went to the drafts folder. There was one email saved yesterday at 11 o'clock at night. Subject inquiry regarding common law assets. My heart stopped, then restarted with a dangerous, slow rhythm. I tapped the email. It was addressed to a lawyer I did not recognize, probably someone cheap, someone he found on a billboard. To whom it may concern. I am seeking a consultation regarding asset division for unmarried partners. I have been in a domestic partnership for 5 years in North Carolina. During this time, I provided significant emotional and strategic support to my partner, who recently sold her software company. I was involved in the early stages of the company, offering feedback and testing, and I believe my contribution was essential to the product's success. Although my name is not on the incorporation papers, I want to know if I have a claim to the proceeds based on sweat equity or implied partnership. The assets are significant, and I was led to believe we were building this future together. Please let me know your rates. Grant Hale. I read it twice. Strategic support, feedback and testing. I remembered the feedback he gave me. He used to complain that the clicking of my mechanical keyboard kept him awake. He used to ask me why I was working on a Saturday. He used to tell me that my little project was taking time away from us. And now, he was calling that sweat equity. He was trying to sue me. He was not just a mooch. He was a predator. He was actively seeking legal counsel to come after the Marblegate money. He was trying to construct a narrative where he was the silent co-founder who had been cut out of the deal. I took a picture of the screen with my phone. Then I took a screenshot on the iPad and emailed it to my encrypted account. Then deleted the email from the sent folder in the trash. I put the iPad back on the table, exactly where I found it. I walked back to my office. My stomach did not drop. The nausea I had felt in the beginning was gone. In its place was a sharp, crystalline focus. This was no longer a relationship dispute. This was liability. Grant was a hostile entity. He was an insider threat who had retained access to the building. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus Thorne, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. Lexi, what is happening? He's going to sue me. I said. My voice was calm, almost robotic. I found a draft email. He is looking for a lawyer to claim sweat equity in Marblegate. He is claiming he was a co-founder. Marcus sighed. A long, weary sigh. Of course he is. They always do. North Carolina does not recognize common law marriage. Lexi, he has no case. He is a boyfriend, not a shareholder. Unless he has a signed contract or a recorded promise of equity, he is fishing in a dry pond. I know. I said, but he is not just fishing, he is fraudulent. I told Marcus about the credit inquiry from Part 3, the one where he used our combined income to apply for the car lease. I told him about the identity theft. Marcus, I said, if he used my identity and my income to apply for credit without my permission, and now he is trying to claim equity in my company based on lies. What is the cleanest way to protect myself? Marcus paused. The silence on the line was heavy. If he used your financial data to apply for a loan in his name without your explicit consent, that is wire fraud. Marcus said, it is federal. I looked at the rain falling outside. I do not want to send him to jail. Marcus, I said, not yet. I just want him gone, and I want him to never, ever be able to come after my company. Then we need to let him dig the hole, Marcus said. His voice shifted. It became the voice of a prosecutor. If we confront him now, he claims it was a mistake. He claims he clicked the wrong box. He claims he thought he had permission. But if he pursues this lawsuit, if he files a claim stating he has rights to your money, while simultaneously committing fraud to use your credit, then we have him. I said, we have him in a vice, Marcus confirmed. We need him to commit to the lie. We need a record so strong that if he ever tries to stand in front of a judge, we can bury him in paper. So I do nothing I asked. You do nothing, Marcus said. You let him file. You let him think he is winning. You let him talk to his cheap lawyer. You let him believe that he has you cornered. And you document every single step. I hung up. I looked at the list I had made on the first night. What he can reach. I picked up my pen. I added a new item to the list. The illusion of victory. I would give him that. I would let him have it. I would let him walk around this house, puffing his chest out, thinking he was the mastermind of a great financial coup. I would let him listen to Sienna Vale and Derek and Owen. I would let him believe that I was weak, that I was scared, that I was a woman who could be rolled over, because the higher he climbed on this ladder of lies, the further he would fall when I kicked it out from under him. I heard the front door open. Grant was home. I quickly minimized the windows on my laptop. I picked up a stack of irrelevant papers and pretended to be reading. He walked into the office. He was wearing his new blazer. It looked good on him. It looked expensive. Hey, he said. He was smiling. It was a predatory smile, though he probably thought it was charming. Just wanted to check in. I know you have been stressed. I looked up at him. I looked at the man who had just emailed a lawyer to ask how to steal my life's work. I am okay. Grant, I said, just busy. Good, he said. He leaned against the door frame. You know, I was thinking, since things are changing, maybe we should sit down later and talk about the future, just so we are on the same page about everything. He was testing the waters. He was preparing to make his demand. I smiled. A soft, tired smile. Sure, Grant, I said. We can talk whenever you are ready. He nodded, satisfied. He thought he saw submission. He did not see the trap. Cool, he said. I'll be in the garage, working on some projects. He walked away. I listened to his footsteps recede. I turned back to my laptop. I opened a new folder. I named it the counterclaim. I dragged the screenshot of the group chat into it. I dragged the photo of the email draft into it. I dragged the credit report into it. I was not building a defense. I was building a cage. And Grant had just walked right into it and locked the door. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered not by a professional process server, but by certified mail in a flimsy envelope that looked like it had already been opened and resealed. I was sitting in my office at Marblegate, the real office, the one behind the glass walls on the 14th floor, when the receptionist brought it in. She held it by the corner, as if it were contaminated. It says legal correspondence, she said, raising an eyebrow. Do you want me to shred it? I shook my head. No. date stamp it, and log it. I waited until she left before I opened it. The letterhead belonged to the law office of Barry J. Sneed. I looked up the address immediately. It was located in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a discount vape shop. This was the bargain attorney Grant had found, the legal equivalent of a knockoff handbag. I began to read. The language was a masterclass in desperation disguised as authority. It was filled with words that sounded expensive, but meant nothing in this context. Phrases like promissory estoppel, emotional distress, and reliance on future earnings. The letter claimed that my sudden and erratic behavior had caused Mr. Hale significant psychological damage. It claimed that our 5-year relationship constituted a verbal contract of partnership. It claimed that Grant had turned down lucrative career opportunities. To support my dream a lie so bold, I almost respected it, and that he was now entitled to a fair and equitable share of the Marblegate acquisition proceeds to maintain the lifestyle he had been promised. It demanded a settlement of $250,000. I did not feel fear. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. Grant had put it in writing. He had officially, legally claimed that he was entitled to my money because I had broken up with him. He had just handed me the evidence of extortion. I scanned the document and sent it to Marcus. His reply came 3 minutes later. "This is adorable. Do not respond. I will handle Barry." I went back to work. I had a transition meeting with the new parent company executives at 2:00. I needed to be sharp, but Grant was not done. When the legal threat didn't produce an immediate wire transfer or a terrified phone call, he decided to escalate from legal harassment to social theater. I had been staying at a hotel for the last 3 nights. I told myself it was to be closer to the office during the transition, but the truth was strategic. I wanted the house to feel empty. I wanted Grant to walk through those silent rooms and feel the vacuum of my absence. I wanted him to realize that without me, the house was just wood and drywall that he couldn't afford to heat. At 4:15 in the afternoon, my administrative assistant buzzed my line. "Lexi," she said, her voice tight, "there are 2 police officers in the lobby. They are asking for you." My heart gave a single, hard thump, not out of guilt, but out of adrenaline. "Send them up," I said. I met them at the glass doors of the executive suite. They were uniformed Charlotte Mecklenburg police officers, looking polite but weary. "Ms. Rivera," the older officer asked. "Yes," I said. I stood tall. I was wearing a tailored suit. I looked like a CEO. I did not look like a woman in crisis. We received a call requesting a wellness check. The officer said, "A Mr. Grant Hale reported that you have been missing for 72 hours, that you have been acting erratically, and that he is concerned for your safety." I let out a small, controlled sigh. "I see." I said, "I am sorry you had to come all this way. Officer, as you can see, I am safe. I am at work." The officer looked me up and down. He looked at the busy office behind me. He looked at the security badge on my hip. "Mr. Hale mentioned that you have deleted your social media and cut off contact," the officer said, reading from a small notepad. "He suggested you might be unstable." I smiled. It was the smile of a woman explaining a toddler's tantrum to an adult. "Officer," I said clearly, "Mr. Hale is my ex-fiancé. We broke up last week. He is currently refusing to vacate my home, and he is attempting to extort money from me through a frivolous legal claim. I am staying at a hotel to avoid conflict while my lawyer handles the eviction. My silence is not instability, it is a boundary." The officer stopped writing. He looked up. "He is in your house." "Yes," I said, "unfortunately, but I am handling it through civil channels." The dynamic shifted instantly. The officers were no longer looking for a missing person. They were looking at a domestic dispute where the weapon was a phone call. "Okay," the officer said, closing his notebook. "We will mark the check as completed. Subject is safe and responsive." "Could you add a note?" I asked. "Could you please document that I stated I left the residence voluntarily and am perfectly fine? I want a neutral record." "We can do that," he said. "Thank you." They left. Grant had tried to use the police to shame me, to drag me out of my office in handcuffs, or at least in tears. Instead, he had just created a police report that confirmed I was sane, employed, and being harassed. He thought the police were his personal customer service department. He forgot that police officers deal with liars every day, and they know exactly what a desperate man sounds like. I went back to my desk. I did not call Grant. I did not text him. I let the silence grow heavier. By 6 o'clock, the narrative began to crack. Grant had evidently expected the police to bring me home, or at least to call him with a report that I was huddled under my desk crying. When that didn't happen, he went to the court of public opinion. He couldn't tag me, because I didn't exist online anymore, so he started posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes on his own profiles. Mara sent me the screenshots. Facebook status, 6:15 p.m. It is funny how money changes people. You think you know someone's heart, but the moment they get a little success, they forget who held them down when they were nobody. Instagram story, 6:30 p.m. A black screen with white text. Betrayal never comes from your enemies. He was trying to bait me. He was trying to force me to log back in, to post a defense, to engage in a public mudslinging contest. He wanted me to look messy. If I looked messy, his claim that I was unstable would have traction. I looked at the screenshots. He's looking for a reaction. I whispered to the empty office. I opened my email. I composed a message to Marcus. Subject: harassment and defamation. Marcus, please see attached screenshots. Also, please request the police report from the wellness check conducted at my office today at 4:15. He is escalating. Send the reply to his lawyer now. Marcus didn't wait. At 7 o'clock that evening, while Grant was likely refreshing his notifications waiting for me to explode, his bargain bin lawyer received a fax and an email from Thorne and Associates. I didn't see Grant's face when he read it, but I can imagine it. The letter from Marcus was not dramatic. It was surgical. Dear Mr. Sneed, we are in receipt of your demand letter dated October 27th. Your client's claims regarding a verbal partnership are patently false and unsupported by North Carolina law. Ms. Rivera aggressively denies any promise of equity or support. Furthermore, be advised that your client's recent conduct specifically filing a false missing person report with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department to harass Ms. Rivera at her place of employment and posting defamatory statements regarding her mental health on social media constitutes a pattern of harassment. All future communication must be directed to this office. Your client is hereby instructed to cease all direct contact with Ms. Rivera. He is to cease contacting her family members. He is to cease implying, publicly or privately, that Ms. Rivera is incapacitated. Failure to comply will result in an immediate motion for a protective order and a countersuit for defamation and abuse of process. Govern yourself accordingly. It was a legal slap in the face. It stripped Grant of his voice. It told him that he was not a heartbroken lover. He was a liability. The next morning, Wednesday, Grant tried one last physical, desperate measure. He tried to come to work, in the old days, before the acquisition. I worked in a smaller building. Grant used to drop by for lunch. He would wave at the security guard, walk back to my desk, and we would go get sandwiches. He thought he still had that privilege. He didn't know that Marblegate had moved my department to a secure wing as part of the integration. He didn't know that my access level had been upgraded to Tier 1 and that Tier 1 employees were behind biometric scanners. I heard about it from security later. Grant had walked into the lobby wearing his new blazer, carrying a coffee presumably for me, a peace offering. He approached the front desk. I am here to see Lexi Rivera. He told the guard. I am her fiancé. The guard, a new hire who didn't know him. Check the system. I am sorry. Sir, the guard said, I do not have you on the guest list. It is fine, Grant insisted, flashing his winning smile. She knows I'm coming. Just buzz me through. I cannot do that. Sir, I can call her assistant. The guard called my assistant. My assistant, who had been briefed, gave a 2-word instruction. Deny access. I am sorry, sir. The guard told Grant. She is unavailable, and she has not authorized a visitor pass. This is ridiculous. Grant apparently snapped, his charm dissolving. I need to speak to her. It is an emergency. Sir, I need you to leave the premises, or I will have to call the police. Grant had stood there in the lobby of the company he claimed to have co-founded, holding a lukewarm coffee. Realizing that he couldn't even get past the turnstile, he wasn't a partner, he wasn't a founder, he was an unauthorized visitor. He turned and walked out. By Wednesday afternoon, the silence from his friends began. Derek and Owen, the loyal soldiers of the breakup dinner, were starting to do the math. They had seen the police car at my office. Word travels fast in Charlotte. They had seen Grant's manic posts. They had likely heard him ranting about lawyers and taking what is his. Drama is fun when it is gossip. It is not fun when it involves subpoenas. I knew they were pulling back because I saw it in the group chats, not the ones I was in, but the ones I could see through the old iPad I had left at the house. Grant text to Derek Mann. She is stonewalling me. I need you to write a character statement saying I was involved in the business planning. Derek's reply took 4 hours to arrive. Derek. Hey man, I am really swamped at work right now. I do not think I can get involved in a legal thing. Maybe you should just let it go. Grant text to Owen. Coming out tonight. Need to blow off steam. Owen, can't tonight. Assisting my mom with some stuff. Catch you later. They were distancing themselves. They realized that Grant was not going to be the fun. Rich, single bachelor. He was going to be the bitter, broke guy suing his ex-girlfriend. That is not a good look for the table at the club. Grant was alone. He was alone in my house, alone in his legal battle, and alone in his social circle. And that is when he panicked. When a narcissist loses control. They do not reflect, they detonate. It was Thursday evening. I was still at the hotel, eating a club sandwich from room service and reviewing the latest code deployment. My phone buzzed. It was an email, not from his lawyer, from Grant directly. He had bypassed Marcus. He had ignored the warning. Subject, final warning, Lexi. I tried to be nice. I tried to keep this civil, but you are trying to erase me. You are trying to steal the future we built. If you do not agree to a meeting by tomorrow at noon to discuss a settlement, I am instructing my lawyer to file the lawsuit. We will sue for 50% of your payout. We will depose your family. We will depose your employees. We will drag your name through the mud until everyone knows that you built your success on my back. Do not test me. I know where the bodies are buried. I stared at the screen. I know where the bodies are buried. It was a threat, a clumsy, melodramatic threat from a man who watched too many movies. There were no bodies. There were only clean audits and proprietary algorithms. But he had made a fatal mistake. He had sent this to me directly, after being told to go through counsel, and he had explicitly threatened to damage my reputation to extract money. That had a name. It was called extortion. I didn't feel angry. I felt a profound sense of relief. He had just given me the final piece of the puzzle. He had moved from annoying ex to criminal liability. I forwarded the email to Marcus. He is threatening to file. I wrote. Marcus replied instantly. Let him. He just handed us the victory. I finished my sandwich. I wiped my mouth. Grant thought the lawsuit was his weapon. He thought the threat of public court would scare me into writing a check. He didn't realize that I wanted him to file. I wanted him to go on the record, because the moment he filed that lawsuit, he opened himself up to discovery. And discovery is a two-way street. He was going to ask for my financial records, but I was going to ask for his. I was going to ask for the records of the business services he bought with my money. I was going to ask for the emails with Sienna Vale. I was going to ask for the proof of his sweat equity. He was bringing a knife to a drone strike. I went to the window of the hotel room and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in my house, Grant was probably pacing the floor, feeling powerful, feeling like he had finally played his ace. I whispered to the glass, "Go ahead, Grant, pull the trigger." The lawsuit landed on my desk on a Friday afternoon, 3 days after Grant's deadline had expired. It was titled, Hale versus Rivera. I stared at the caption. Seeing my name listed as a defendant gave me a momentary jolt. Not of fear, but of surreal detachment. It was like seeing my name in the credits of a movie I did not remember filming. The complaint was 12 pages long. Grant's bargain bin attorney, Mr. Sneed, had clearly been paid by the word. The document was a masterpiece of creative fiction. It alleged that Grant was a de facto co-founder of Marblegate Systems. It claimed that our evening conversations constituted strategic consulting sessions. It argued that his decision to work low-paying jobs was a sacrifice made to allow me to focus on my code. Creating an implied contract of mutual support, he was asking for 50% of the buyout. He was asking for alimony. He was asking for attorney's fees. I sat in the conference room at Thorne & Associates, sliding the document across the polished mahogany table to Marcus. "It is bold," Marcus said. Flipping through the pages, I will give him that. "He is swinging for the fences. Is it dangerous?" I asked. Marcus chuckled. "It is only dangerous if we play his game. He wants a settlement. He wants you to look at this number, panic, and write him a check for $50,000 just to make him go away. He is banking on the fact that you are busy, you are private, and you hate conflict." He forgot one thing. I said, "What is that?" "I hate losing more than I hate conflict." Marcus smiled. He opened his laptop. "Then we are going to teach Mr. Hale about the discovery process. See, Lexi, when you file a lawsuit claiming financial partnership, you waive your right to financial privacy. If he wants to claim he was your partner, he has to show his books. He has to prove he was acting like a partner. We did not just file a motion to dismiss. That would have been too quick. We filed an answer and counterclaim, but the real weapon was the attached document defendant's first set of interrogatories and requests for production of documents. We asked for everything. We asked for 5 years of his bank statements. We asked for his credit card statements. We asked for his tax returns. We asked for all correspondence regarding his contributions to Marblegate. We asked for a list of all debts and liabilities incurred in the last 24 months. We turned the lights on. 2 weeks later, the response arrived. Grant's production of documents was a mess. It was a digital dump of PDFs, screenshots, and scanned receipts, clearly thrown together in a panic. He had probably spent hours scanning random papers, thinking he was burying us in data. I spent the weekend in my hotel room, not with a glass of wine, but with 2 monitors and a red pen. I went through his timeline. In the lawsuit, Grant claimed that on June 12th of last year, he had consulted with me for 4 hours regarding the Marblegate user interface design. I checked his credit card statement for June 12th. On June 12th, Grant had spent 6 hours at a driving range and bar in Concord. He had spent $40 on beer and $30 on bucketballs. Unless he was designing user interfaces between swings, he was lying. I found dozens of these contradictions. Dates where he claimed to be working on my business, but his financial footprint placed him at movie theaters, golf courses, and bars. But then I found the smoking gun. It was buried in a credit card statement from a bank I did not recognize. It was a card I had never seen. The account holder was listed as Grant Hale, but the guarantor, the person responsible for the debt if he defaulted, was listed as Alexis Rivera. I froze. I had never signed for this card. I looked at the transaction history. The card had been opened 4 months ago. The limit was $10,000. The balance was $9,800. And the charges were almost exclusively to one vendor, SV Strategic Consulting, Sienna Vale. I pulled up the invoices he had submitted. He was paying her $2,000 a month for lifestyle architecture and brand positioning, but he wasn't paying her with his money. He had opened a credit line using my social security number, which he had access to from our tax documents, and forged my digital signature as a guarantor. He was using my credit to pay the woman who was coaching him on how to leave me. I felt a cold, sharp anger crystallize in my chest. This was not just a bad breakup. This was a felony. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. "I found it." I said. "What did you find, fraud?" I said. I emailed him the PDF. Page 42. Look at the guarantor. I heard Marcus typing. Then silence. Then a low whistle. He forged your guarantee, Marcus said. Yes. And look at where the money went. Sienna Vale? Lexi, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. This changes the posture of the case. We are no longer defending a civil claim. We are holding a criminal indictment in our back pocket. What do? We dispute it, Marcus said. But we do it formally. We file an affidavit of forgery with the bank. We notify the credit bureaus, and we amend our counterclaim to include fraud, conversion, and identity theft. We send a copy to his lawyer, and just for fun, we subpoena Sienna Vale for the records of these services. Subpoena her, I asked. Absolutely, Marcus said. If she accepted payments from a fraudulently obtained line of credit, she is potentially liable to clawback. Let us see how loyal she is when she realizes her client paid her with stolen money. We fired the missiles on a Tuesday morning. I filed the fraud affidavit with the bank. I attached the police report from the wellness check just to establish a pattern of his erratic behavior. Then Marcus sent the amended response to Mr. Sneed. The reaction was immediate. Grant did not call his lawyer. He called me. My phone rang at 11 o'clock. Grant? I did not answer. It rang again and again. Then the text started coming. Lexi, pick up. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. My lawyer says you are accusing me of fraud. Are you crazy? It was a mistake. I thought I had your permission. You said we were a team. Please, can we just meet for coffee? Just 5 minutes. I want to settle this. I miss you. I looked at the words on the screen. I miss you. He did not miss me. He missed the safety. He missed the immunity. He realized that the business services account he had opened was not just a clever way to fund his rebranding. It was a paper trail that led directly to a jail cell. He was panicking. The confident tech founder persona had evaporated. He was just a scared man who had been caught stealing from the only person who had ever protected him. I did not reply to the texts. I took a screenshot of them. I emailed them to Marcus. Then I had Marcus send a one-line email to Mr. Sneed. Mr. Hale is attempting to contact my client directly in violation of our previous instruction. If this continues, we will seek a restraining order. All settlement offers must be in writing. By Wednesday, the ground under Grant's feet began to crumble. Sienna Vale, the brand strategist, received her subpoena. I can only imagine the scene. A process server walking into her beige and gold office, handing her a court order demanding her financial records regarding Grant Hale. Sienna was a grifter, but she was a smart grifter. She knew that associating with a fraud investigation was bad for the brand. Chloe, my friend in marketing, texted me on Thursday. Guess who is single? I smiled. Grant, yep. Sienna unfollowed him. She scrubbed him from her stories. Apparently, she told people she was misled by a client who misrepresented his financial status. She had dropped him the moment the ink on the subpoena was dry. Grant was no longer a whale. He was a liability. He was a man with a negative net worth and a looming fraud case. Grant was now truly alone. No girlfriend, no brand strategist, no friends. Just a mountain of debt and a lawyer who was probably asking for a retainer top-up that Grant could not afford. On Friday, the court notice arrived. Hearing set motion for summary judgment and preliminary injunction. The date was set for 3 weeks from now. Grant had wanted his day in court. He had threatened me with it. He had used the legal system as a weapon to scare me. But now, the weapon was pointed at him. He sent one last email to me on Friday night. It was different from the others. The bravado was gone. The anger was gone. Lexi, I am sorry. I messed up. I got bad advice. I listened to people who did not know us. Can we please just stop this? I will drop the lawsuit. I will move out. I just want this to be over. I do not want to go to court. Please, I am drowning here. I sat in my hotel room and read the email. It sounded sincere. It sounded like the old Grant, the one I had loved, the one who used to hold my hand in the movies. But sincerity that arrives under pressure is not sincerity. It is fear wearing perfume. He was not sorry he did it. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry that the woman he thought was a passive checkbook turned out to be a forensic auditor. If I stopped now, If I let him off the hook, he would learn nothing. He would think that he could push me to the edge and then pull back when it got too hot. He would think that tears were a currency I still accepted. I hit reply. I did not write a paragraph. I did not write a goodbye. I wrote one sentence. Please direct all future communication to Mr. Thorne. I hit send. I closed my laptop. I had not started this fight. I had tried to be casual. I had tried to be fair. I had tried to walk away cleanly. But Grant had opened a door. He had invited the law into our living room, and now he was going to have to live in the house he built. I did not attend Grant's birthday party. I did not need to. When you light a fuse, you do not need to stand next to the dynamite to know that it has exploded. You just have to wait for the shockwave. November 12th was his 34th birthday. In the past, I would have planned this day for months. I would have rented a private room at a steakhouse. I would have bought him a watch or a set of golf clubs. I would have invited his family and ensured the cake was his favorite flavor, salted caramel. This year, Grant planned it himself. He rented the VIP section of Aura, a lounge in Uptown that charges $20 for a cocktail and smells of desperation and expensive perfume. It was a strategic choice. Aura is where people go to be seen. It is where you go when you want to convince the world that you are thriving, that you are wealthy, and that you are unbothered. He invited everyone. He invited our mutual friends. He invited acquaintances he had not spoken to in 2 years. He invited the people he had been trash-talking me to for the last 3 weeks. He wanted an audience. He needed to overwrite the reality of the last few days, the subpoena to Siena, the fraud affidavit, the silence from his inner circle with a loud, bright, public victory. I sat in my hotel room, wearing a plush robe, eating takeout sushi. My phone lay on the bed beside me. It was connected to Mara, who had agreed to be my eyes and ears. She was not there to cause a scene. She was there as a witness. The text messages started arriving at 8:30 in the evening. He is wearing a tuxedo jacket with jeans. Mara wrote, "He looks manic. He is sweating. Even though the AC is blasting, I could picture him." The high-gloss smile, the eyes darting around the room, checking to see who was watching. Who was believing him? "Who is there?" I typed back. "Derek is here," Mara replied. "He looks like he wants to throw up. He is drinking water." Owen did not show up. Smart man. I smiled. Derek was the weak link. He knew about the fraud. He knew about the group chat. He was standing there watching his friend perform a play on a stage that was already burning down. And he was terrified that the sparks would land on him. According to Mara, Grant spent the first hour working the room with the energy of a politician on the eve of an election he knows he is losing. He bought rounds of drinks, likely using a new credit card he had managed to secure, or perhaps spending the last of his personal savings. He laughed too loudly. He slapped people on the back too hard. He told everyone the same story. Lexi just could not handle the pressure. He told a group of his former college roommates. "She is a great girl, but the money changed her. She got paranoid, controlling. I had to get out for my own sanity." He was painting himself as the martyr. He was the simple, honest man who had walked away from the golden cage because he valued his soul more than my bank account. At 9:30, the music lowered. The DJ, whom Grant had likely paid extra, announced a toast. Grant climbed onto a velvet banquette. He held up a glass of champagne. The room went quiet. There were about 40 people there, friends, hangers-on, and the curious observers who just wanted to see the wreckage. Mara recorded the audio and sent it to me later. I listened to it in the quiet of my hotel room. "Thank you all for coming," Grant said. His voice was slightly slurred, but he projected confidence. "This has been a crazy year, a hard year. As many of you know, I have gone through some big changes recently. There was a murmur in the crowd. I learned a lot." Grant continued. "I learned that you cannot buy happiness. I learned that you cannot force a relationship to work when the values do not align. I had to make a tough choice. I had to choose peace. I had to walk away from toxicity, even when it was comfortable. I listened to him rewrite history. I listened to him take my silence, my boundaries, and my legal protection, and reframe them as toxicity that he had escaped. "So here is to fresh starts," Grant yelled, raising his glass. "Here is to knowing your worth." The room clapped. It was not a thunderous applause. It was polite. It was the applause of people who were willing to drink his alcohol, but were not quite ready to buy his story. Grant hopped down from the banquette, flushed with the dopamine hit of attention. He took a long swallow of his champagne, and that is when the music stopped. It did not fade out. It cut off. A man had walked past the bouncer. He was not on the guest list. He was not wearing a tuxedo jacket. He was wearing a windbreaker and holding a large manila envelope. Process servers are like ghosts. You never see them until they are touching you. Grant was still smiling, wiping champagne from his lip, when the man tapped him on the shoulder. Grant turned around. "Hey man, private party," he said, his voice jovial. "Grant Hale," the man asked. "Yeah, that is me." The man thrust the envelope into Grant's chest. Grant's reflexes took over. He grabbed it before it fell. "You have been served," the man said, "courtesy of Thorne and Associates." The man turned and walked out before Grant could even blink. The room was deadly silent. In a crowded lounge, silence has a texture. It feels heavy. It feels suffocating. Everyone was looking at the envelope. It was thick. It was heavy. It contained the amended counterclaim. It contained the allegations of identity theft, credit card fraud, and conversion. It contained the court order for the preliminary injunction. Grant looked down at the envelope. His face went pale, draining of color so fast it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of him. He looked up. He saw 40 pairs of eyes staring at him. He tried to laugh. It was a terrible sound, a dry, jagged bark of a laugh. "Wow," Grant said. "She really has no chill. Does she, sending paperwork to my birthday? Classy." He tried to toss the envelope onto a nearby table like it was junk mail, but his hand was shaking. He missed the table edge. The envelope slid off and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Nobody laughed. Derek stepped back. He physically retreated, moving behind a group of girls, putting human shields between himself and Grant. Grant looked around the room. The confidence was cracking. The fresh start persona was dissolving, revealing the panicked man beneath. "It is just admin stuff," Grant said, his voice pitching higher. "Just standard breakup drama. You know how it is. She is just trying to ruin the night." And then, it happened. The question, it came from a woman named Sarah. Sarah was not my best friend, but she was an accountant. She was logical, and she had been listening to Grant's speech about walking away from toxicity. She stood near the bar, holding a vodka soda. She looked at the envelope on the floor. Then she looked at Grant. "Grant," she said. Her voice was clear. It cut through the room like a bell. "If you walked away, and if you were not serious about her, why are you suing her?" Grant froze. It was the one question he could not answer. If he was the one who ended it, if he was the one who wanted casual, if he was the one who chose peace over money, then why was he the plaintiff? Why was he the one dragging me to court demanding a payout? Grant stammered. It is complicated." "Sarah." "Is it Sarah?" asked. "Because my cousin works at the courthouse. She saw the filing. You are asking for 50% of her company." "That does not sound like walking away. That sounds like a shakedown." The word hung in the air. Shakedown. Grant's face turned from pale to a blotchy, violent red. The mask did not just slip. It shattered. "You do not know what you are talking about," Grant shouted. "The charm was gone. The peace was gone. I built that life." Grant screamed, his hands balling into fists. "I supported her. I sacrificed my career so she could play with her little computer codes. I deserve that money. It is mine." He was pacing now, frantic, erratic. "She thinks she can just cut me off," he yelled, spit flying from his mouth. "She thinks she can just keep it all because her name is on the paper. I was the partner. I was the one who made her look good. She is nothing without me. She is just a cold, unlovable workaholic who thinks she can buy people." He kicked the envelope on the floor. "She owes me," he roared. She owes me for 5 years of my life." The room recoiled. People did not argue with him. They did not boo him. They did something much worse. They stepped back. It was a collective, instinctual movement. The circle around him widened. They were looking at him not with anger, but with revulsion. They were seeing the entitlement. They were seeing the greed. They were seeing the violence simmering under the surface of the nice guy. He had just admitted it. He wasn't walking away from toxicity. He was chasing a check. He wasn't heartbroken. He was bankrupt and furious that his meal ticket had been canceled. Grant looked around, panting. He looked for validation. He looked for Derek. Derek was gone. He had slipped out the back door the moment Grant started screaming. Grant looked at the crowd. He saw their faces. He saw the judgment. What he snapped at them. "You are all on her side now because she has money. Is that it?" Nobody said a word. Sarah placed her drink on the bar. She picked up her purse. "Happy birthday, Grant," she said quietly. She turned and walked out. Then another person left. Then a couple. It was a slow, excruciating exodus. They didn't say goodbye. They just left. They walked out of the VIP section, past the velvet ropes, and out into the night. Within 3 minutes, Grant was standing alone in the center of the room. The music was still off. The lights were still dim. The envelope was still on the floor. He stood there, panting, wearing his tuxedo jacket and jeans, surrounded by half-empty glasses and the wreckage of his own reputation. My phone buzzed. Mara called me. I picked up. "It is over," she said. Her voice was hushed, awestruck. "What happened?" I asked, even though I knew. "He lost it," Mara said. "He screamed at everyone. He admitted he felt entitled to the money. Everyone left. Lexi. He is standing there alone. The waiter just brought the bill for the bottle service. And I do not think he can pay it." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headboard pillows. "He did not lose because you attacked him," Mara said softly. "He lost because he showed everyone who he was when the script broke." "I know." I said. "What are you going to do?" Mara asked. "I am going to sleep," I said, "and on Monday, I am going to accept his surrender." I hung up the phone. I did not feel joy. I did not feel giddy. Revenge is not sweet. It is savory. It is substantial. Grant had tried to win the crowd. He thought that if he told the story loud enough, it would become true. He thought that public opinion could override facts, but he forgot that in a social setting. Just like in a courtroom, credibility is everything. And when you scream about money while claiming to seek peace, you do not look like a victim. You look like a defendant. I turned off the lamp. The hotel room plunged into darkness. Tomorrow, the real legal work would begin. But tonight, the court of public opinion had returned its verdict. Guilty. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse does not look like the ones on television. It does not smell like mahogany and justice. It smells like floor wax, stale coffee, and the damp wool of cheap suits. It is a place of fluorescent lights and humming vending machines, a bureaucratic machine designed to grind emotion into paperwork. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded on top of a pristine manila folder. I wore a charcoal gray suit, high-necked, impenetrable. Beside me, Marcus Thorne sat with the relaxed posture of a man who already knew the score of the game before the first pitch was thrown. Across the aisle, Grant sat next to Mr. Sneed. Grant looked different. The swagger from the birthday party was gone. The casual, wealthy bachelor persona had been stripped away, replaced by a suit that fit him a little too loosely and a haircut that was trying too hard to look respectable. He was tapping his foot against the leg of the table, a rapid, nervous rhythm that echoed in the quiet courtroom. He looked at me once. He tried to give me a look of wounded longing, a look that said we shouldn't be here. "Lexi," I did not look back. I looked at the judge. Judge Holloway was a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression that suggested she had heard every lie a human being was capable of telling. She did not bang a gavel. She simply shuffled a stack of files and looked over her glasses. "All right," she said, her voice dry. We are here on the matter of Hale versus Rivera. Motion for summary judgment filed by the defendant. Let us proceed. Mr. Sneed stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He began to speak. And immediately, the air in the room grew heavy with second-hand embarrassment. Your Honor, he began, his voice booming slightly too loud for the small room. My client, Mr. Hale, is the victim of a classic bait and switch. For 5 years, he poured his heart, soul, and strategic intellect into the partnership with Ms. Rivera. He was the silent architect of her success. He was promised a future. He was promised equity. And the moment the payout arrived, he was discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Judge Holloway did not look up from her file. Counsel, do you have a written contract? Well, no, Your Honor. Sneed stammered, but as you know, North Carolina law allows for implied contracts based on conduct. The conduct of a boyfriend, Judge Holloway asked. She flipped a page. I see here that Mr. Hale claims he provided strategic consulting. Do you have timesheets? Do you have emails where he is delivering code? Do you have a single piece of paper where Miss Rivera acknowledges his professional contribution? We have his testimony, Your Honor, Sneed said, and we have the fact that they live together as a unit. Judge Holloway sighed. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Thorne, Marcus stood up. He did not button his jacket. He did not raise his voice. Your Honor, Marcus said, Mr. Hale was a guest in Miss Rivera's home. He did not pay rent. He did not pay the mortgage. He did not contribute to the development of the software. In fact, during the hours he claims he was consulting, we have credit card records placing him at Topgolf, various bars, and a cinema in Concord. Marcus slid a piece of paper across the bench. The judge looked at it. She looked at Grant. Mr. Hale, the judge said, on June 12th, you claim in your affidavit that you spent 4 hours debugging the inventory algorithm with Ms. Rivera. Grant stood up. Yes, Your Honor. It was a grueling session. The judge held up the paper. Then why does your credit card statement show a charge for $45 at the Thirsty Beaver Saloon at exactly the same time Grant froze? He blinked. I might have the dates mixed up. It was a long project. The judge dropped the paper. It fluttered to the desk. It gets worse, Your Honor, Marcus continued. While Mr. Hale is asking this court for equitable relief, claiming he was a partner, he was simultaneously committing fraud against that alleged partner. Marcus presented the fraud affidavit. He presented the evidence of the credit card opened in my name. He presented the invoices from Sienna Vale. We have evidence that the plaintiff used the defendant's identity to secure credit without her authorization. Marcus said he used these funds to pay for lifestyle coaching to help him leave the relationship. It is our position that you cannot claim to be a victim of a broken partnership while actively stealing from the partner you are suing. The courtroom went silent. Grant's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He looked at Sneed, but Sneed was busy arranging his pens, distancing himself from the radioactive fallout occurring next to him. Judge Holloway read the documents. She read them slowly, then she took off her glasses. Mr. Sneed, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Yes, Your Honor. I am looking at a credit application with a signature that does not match the defendant's. I am looking at a police report regarding a wellness check that your client used to harass the defendant at her place of business. And I am looking at a lawsuit demanding 50% of a company he has zero equity in. She leaned forward. I am dismissing the plaintiff's claims with prejudice, she said. There is no evidence of a partnership. There is only evidence of a relationship that ended. And frankly, based on these financial documents, I am inclined to refer this matter to the district attorney's office for review regarding the identity theft allegations. Grant made a sound. It was a small, strangled gasp. Dismissed, the judge said. She started packing up her files. It was over. In 20 minutes, 5 years of history and 3 weeks of terror had been dismantled by a woman in a black robe who just wanted to go to lunch. Mr. Sneed was packing his briefcase before the judge had even stood up. He muttered something to Grant, probably a billable goodbye, and hurried out of the aisle. Grant sat there. He looked stunned. He looked like a man who had walked off a cliff expecting to fly, only to remember that gravity is a law, not a suggestion. Marcus turned to me. Congratulations. Lexi. Thank you. Marcus. I said. I stood up. I felt light. I felt like my bones were made of helium. I turned to leave. Lexi. Grant said. His voice was rough. He was standing up, holding the edge of the table. I stopped. I did not turn my body toward him. I just turned my head. He walked toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, respecting the barrier of the aisle. He looked at me, and I saw the last card he had to play. He tried to summon the old Grant. He tried to summon the soft eyes, the intimacy, the history. He wanted a moment. He wanted closure. He wanted me to yell at him, or cry, or tell him that I still loved him, but we just couldn't work. He wanted to be the tragic hero of a romance, not the villain of a crime drama. Why, he asked. He gestured helplessly with his hands. Why did you go so hard? Lexi. We could have talked. We could have worked something out. You destroyed me. You ruined my reputation. You tried to get me arrested. Over what? Because I needed some space. He shook his head, tears actually forming in his eyes. I just wanted us to be casual for a while. I just wanted to slow down. Why did you have to turn it into a war? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had whispered to me in the restaurant. I looked at the man who had lied to my face, stolen my identity, and tried to take my life's work. And I realized he still didn't get it. He truly believed that casual meant he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. I turned fully toward him. Grant, I said. My voice was soft. It was the same volume he had used at the restaurant. I did not turn it into a war. I turned it into a contract. He frowned. What Marcus stepped forward then. He held up a file he had been holding in reserve. Mr. Hale, Marcus said pleasantly. In the initial deposition, which you skipped, we were prepared to submit the transcript of your conversation at the restaurant as a verbal contract modification. Grant looked from Marcus to me. I don't understand. You set the terms. Grant, I said. I took a step closer to him. At the restaurant. You said you were not ready for a serious relationship. I said, you defined the terms. A serious relationship implies shared assets, shared futures, and shared liabilities. A casual relationship implies separate lives, separate finances, and zero obligation. I tilted my head. I simply agreed with you. I accepted your offer. You wanted to be casual, so I treated you like a casual acquaintance. I removed you from my serious accounts. I removed you from my serious life. I treated you exactly the way you asked to be treated. Grant's mouth opened slightly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had thought I was punishing him. He had thought I was being vindictive. He hadn't realized that I was just following the rules he had created. You, he whispered, you wanted the benefits of a husband with the commitment of a stranger. I said, but that is not how contracts work. You cannot have the equity without the liability. I checked my watch. It was a Rolex I had bought for myself yesterday. I did not ruin you. Grant, I said, you ruined yourself because you forgot that I am a woman who listens. I leaned in, just a little, so only he could hear the final twist of the knife. You told me you weren't ready for something serious, I whispered. And you were right, because what just happened in this courtroom, this was serious, and you were definitely not ready for it. I pulled back. Grant stood there, frozen. The color had drained from his face completely. He finally understood. The trap wasn't the lawsuit. The trap wasn't the fraud investigation. The trap was the word casual. He had used it as a shield, and I had sharpened it into a sword. I turned to Marcus. I am ready to go. We walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. I could feel Grant staring at my back, a small, diminishing figure in a room that was too big for him. We pushed through the heavy double doors. The hallway was bright. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was the same sunlight that had shone on my house, but it looked different here. It looked cleaner. Marcus turned to me. So, what now? The fraud case is with the DA. The civil case is dead. You are free. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of freedom. It smelled of potential. Now, I said, I go back to work. I have a company to run. And you, Marcus asked. Personally, I smiled. It was not the tight, controlled smile I had worn for 3 weeks. It was a real smile. It reached my eyes. Personally, I said, I am going to be very, very serious about my happiness, and I am going to be very, very casual about everything else. I walked out of the courthouse doors and into the noise of the city. I did not look back. I did not check my phone. I did not wonder where Grant was going to sleep tonight. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. A steady, rhythmic sound. It was the sound of a woman building a life, brick by brick, on a foundation that no one could ever shake again. I unlocked the door, got in, and drove away. The rearview mirror was empty, and for the first time in 5 years, the road ahead was entirely mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Lexi's journey from heartbreak to absolute victory. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Charlotte, or somewhere quiet on the other side of the world? Please let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories, and if you enjoyed this takedown, please make sure to subscribe to the Leona Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need to be reminded that sometimes the best revenge is just following the rules. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.